Am I live? Is it live? Let's see here. I'm going to close this. Let's get into the proceedings this evening, y'all. Welcome. This is the inaugural. This is my first live stream of student hours. I got a theme song. Let me get a theme song in here. I need a theme song. Let's see if I got something for us. Oh, let's see. Let me try one more time. I got to have a theme song. Here we go. Yeah. I'm gonna let it breathe for a little bit. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my inaugural live stream, Student Hours, with Professor Clavell. I'm here. I'll be here for a half hour. This is gonna be fun. I got some things lined up. It's a little bit long. Just let it breathe, right? Here we go. So I bring it down here. All right, welcome. This is Student Hours with your professor, Clavell. I'm here. We're going to go over a couple of things, just an open discussion. We'll probably go over some histology on this section here this evening, but the goal is just to keep an open line here of communication in the time of COVID. We know that I have a class that's online, I have a class that's hybrid, and even our in-person classes. This is a chance for you guys to see me without a mask and talk a little bit here. So let's get into it here. I'll kind of bring up something that might be similar to my in-person classes with my announcements page here. I got a little meme that will get started here. It's exactly what I was afraid of. What? Skeletons, right? Do a little promo here while I'm at it too as well. So find my slides here. Get a little promo. This episode, we'll call it an episode. This episode of Student Hours with your professor here has been brought to you by the Arizona Western Student Success Center. So the Arizona Western Student Success Center, found on campus, but not only on campus. You can see that there's online and telephonic options here. So free tutoring, in-person, Zoom, and email. So again, they have graphic calculator rentals, computer access. A lot of my students previously, so if you're taking my anatomy and physiology classes, you can contact a tutor who's taken the class from me previously. There's the hours, Monday through Thursday, 8 to 6. Tutoring starts at 9. They're also open on Fridays and available by virtual appointment only. So again, today's broadcast brought to you by the Arizona Western Student Success Center. I look forward to each of you gaining some good knowledge and interacting with the Student Success Center. I have personally donated a number of resources there, so the textbooks that we utilize in my classes, as well as Netter's Anatomy and the brief atlas as well, is all there in the Student Success Center for you guys to use as resources as well. So again, look for the Student Success Center either virtually or in person, and I encourage you to all participate there. But here we are. We're going live. We are in the... Let's transition. Get me my big face going on here. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the topics that I usually bring up in my earlier in-person classes. We'll talk a little bit about histology this evening here. We're going to look at some slides that I've pulled up in terms of what cells look like underneath the microscope, what do a collection of cells, which is a tissue, looks like under a microscope as well. So if you're a student of mine here at Arizona Western College, one of the good resources that you're going to utilize here is going to be the websites posted right there on your Canvas page. So I'll pick up a couple of pages here if we find the website here of your very own Canvas page. And so we'll drop that in. I'll give you the student view here so it looks just like you see it when you see it on my screen here. Transition. So if you go to modules into the student menu here, you'll see modules. Zoom in there, show you where the modules page is. That's where really your Canvas is going to live. I want to focus on two websites this evening here. So two websites specifically. These websites are histology websites, so looking at a collection of cells, tissues, and how they function or how they perhaps have a different form as a result. So the websites here for us to go through are going to be our digitalhistology.org, the histologyguide.org as well. So digitalhistology.org has some really good slides. The histology guide is going to give you some really good material in which you'll be able to zoom in, zoom out, really get some focus on some of the tissues and cells as we see. I'll really start us into and again, in Canvas, if you just simply click on the link there, it'll take you to an embedded page right there in your Canvas website. So you can see that histology guide is right there. We're going to go into the slide box this afternoon or this evening here. In the slide box, we're going to start from the top. We'll look at Chapter 1, the cell, this evening. So Chapter 1, the cell, we'll be looking at some of the characteristics of some very common cells. So as you zoom down, they've got some interesting facts about the light microscope, acidic and basic dyes, the pancreas. And now the goal I'm going to look at here is this nuclear morphology, right? So the nuclear morphology is going to look at some of the components of a cell. And again, we're here in this section where you can probably see those slides right there. I'm going to switch modes on us here and get us into a little bit of a bigger screen for our own edification here. So we'll transition into that slide. And so here we are. We're looking at these three structures. What you have here is a lymph node. You have a portion of the spinal cord. And then we'll take a look at what we have here on the left side of our screen. I think that's a kidney. I think it's a kidney, but we'll take a look here as we go. We'll start by looking at this lymph node, and the real base part of what we're going to look at here is going to be identifying parts of a cell. So let's start by clicking down here. We'll look at the lymph node here first, and I'll start by zooming in here and looking at different types of nuclei. So the most prominent feature that you'll start to see here in terms of a cell is its nuclei, right? And we can see that there's two really general classifications of this nuclei. You have the heterochromatin, which has a real dense DNA, allows for it to be stained very darkly into a dark area, and we can see those spots right here on the top of the screen highlighted. And then you have what's identified as this euchromatin. So these nuclei are much more dispersed. So, or I should say the DNA are much more dispersed, and so we can see that they almost look wider. They're almost a little bit more translucent as a result. So nuclei are the first thing that we're going to be able to see when we look at the cells underneath the microscope. They come out, they stain very darkly. They're pretty prominent here. And so as we see here, we can see that each of these darkly stained structures is a nuclei. And then as you start to look around it, you can start to see the cell membranes around it. So the nucleus has its own cell membrane, and then the cell has its membrane. So they stain fairly the same. So you'll see these structures. You'll see an outside cell membrane as well as the nucleus of the cell. Now, as we'll learn here, this is the lymph node. As we'll learn, cells just take different forms and different functions. So we looked at some nuclei there of what looks like probably the spinal cord. So we were looking at the spinal cord. Now we're at the lymph node. This is the lymph node, and each of those darkly stained items is a nuclei. Now, this is what we're looking at is lymphocytes. So lymphocytes, they have darkly stained nuclei, but the nuclei take up predominantly 75% of the whole cell here. So what we're looking at is a nuclei that is very large, takes up most of the cell. So each of these little dark spots here is a lymphocyte, and what they're doing is they're huddled around. This is a capillary right here. So you can see there's blood flow. So there's very many red blood cells. Red blood cells are one of the smallest cells in the body. And so as we see here, there's the capillary, some darkly stained nuclei all around it. We're looking at a lymph node here. And what we're doing is really getting a classic example of what cells look like in the different options of throughout the body here. So this is a lymphocyte here, and you can see those dark nuclei all around. Maybe a different type of cell or a different type of cell are these adipose cells or fat cells, right? So if we zoom in a little bit more here, we can see that these adipocytes, they have nuclei, and you can see this nuclei right there. You can see another nuclei there, and we can even center up in there. There's the nuclei. And so what we have is a cell, and we can see the outlining of that cell, a peripherally located nucleus. And so the trick here with the adipose tissue is that oftentimes it's filled with a lipid, and it's sliced so thinly as to make it through so light can penetrate on a microscope, you lose the actual contents of this cell. So what you have is a hollow shell or a hollow cell, we could call it, right? And then the outskirted nuclei. And let me zoom out here just a little bit. We are looking at a lymph node. And just take a gander, or just appreciate one thing that we'll start to learn. It will do a lot of in anatomy and physiology is appreciate what we're looking at here. And so hopefully you can see that there's actually even some distinct differences in the layers here. So you can see there's a layer here of lighter pinkish red tissue here, and there's those darkly stained nuclei kind of scattered around. And then you have what we identified as that adipose tissue. So you have a collection of adipocytes or adipose cells here straggled around and huddled. And then we get back into a little bit of that pinkish reddish hue context with the much more nuclei scattered in and around. And then as you continue to progress here, we're seeing lymphocytes, a collection of blood cells or white blood cells here that are going to provide immunity in the case of a lymph node. And so it's always good to just scan out, take a look at the different contexts or the different cells or tissues that are contained in each of these slides. And so we can continue to zoom in here, and we see again these lymphocytes, another type of cell in the human body. And we'll move into our spinal cord here. We'll take a look at what do the cells of a spinal cord, they're called neurons. So neurons have a very unique set of characteristics, and a motor neuron is one that sends a signal out to your hands from the brain out to, or the spinal cord out to your hands and feet to move or anything of the like. And you can see that these nuclei right there, darkly stained nuclei, it's got a nice outer lining here, but this cell is actually going to have a very long extension, so we don't even see the full outline of this cell here. We can see that this motor nuclei is probably going to go a distance, could go as far as my finger, or maybe even just innervate some of the muscles of my arms and legs. But you can see that there's the nuclei, the nucleus, with a nice outer cell membrane. and then the structure here. Now, there's many more helping cells located in the spinal cord of the central nervous system. And so that's what a number and collection of these cells are here that are dispersed around these neurons. We can also see, can anybody guess what we're looking at here? This is a blood cell, right? These are red blood cells with what may be a vascular structure, perhaps a vein here. It doesn't look like there's much smooth muscle tissue lining around it, but this looks like a vein here with some red blood cells being dispersed throughout. And then on the third of our tissues here, so we'll zoom out, show you where we're at here. The third of our tissues here, we'll be looking at the liver. That's what the section is. It's a cross-section of the liver here. So in the liver, we're going to find a number of cells known as hepatocytes. So the cells specific to the liver are hepatocytes. We can zoom in there and just take a look as we begin. There they go. So you can see right there, there's a collection of these hepatocytes. And you can see they're a little bit different as well. They have a little bit more of cytosol or content within the cell that's not the nucleus. And so we can see that there's the nuclei here. And then all around it is the outer cell membrane. And then you have another nuclei with the cell membrane lodged all around it. And so these cells, again, this is the cells of the liver here. They have a different function. As a result, they have a different form. They have different shapes that's conducive to their form. And we'll learn about that throughout the next few semesters of anatomy and physiology. But there we have, again, a little bit of red blood cells there lining the outside of this cell here. And again, with the nucleus being shown. Cool. So again, let's take a look at what we were looking here. If we look at the top here, we're on histologyguide.org. We've started on the first chapter of histology.org where we're just looking at cells. This website is provided on your Canvas page. I encourage you to look it up. Get familiar with these slides, even slides like mitosis, right? As we'll look at the cell and cell structures. We'll also look at the phases of a life cycle of a cell. And so we'll start with the interphase, right? Like that's the normal lifestyle of a cell here where we can see this interphase where it spends most of its time. Right? This is excuse me, I should introduce this slide here. What we're looking at is the root of an onion root. And so it's a collection of cells. You can see that these cells have a pretty rigid cell membrane. So this is not a human tissue of any sort. We're looking at a plant cell here. And it has a really hard, rigid, outlined cell wall here. And this is a cell here, as we mentioned, in interphase, living out most of its life. We can see that here too. Now the first phase of cell division or mitosis is that prophase, and that's when the DNA starts to unwind and uncoil here. So you have the prophase. They have a couple of examples of prophase here. So this is one of them. Let's take a look at the other one here. So again, these uncoiling of the DNA inside of the cell. The next phase of mitosis after the prophase becomes metaphase. Metaphase is meta, kind of referring to the middle, is when we have that DNA line up in the middle. So we can identify this metaphase here by the DNA the chromosomes lined up in the middle of the cell. You can see the structures here starting to pull them away. metaphase. This is what we're looking at. We'll take another picture of a metaphase. There it is right there. That's a beautiful picture there. You can see the chromosomes kind of dangled and strangled, and they're getting pulled away a little bit there. As they line up in the center, they'll begin pulling away. The cell's this is cell division, mitosis, right? So the cell's gonna start to pinch and cleavage off, and then you have 2 new cells. So as you go from this metaphase stage, there's anaphase. Anaphase is the pulling away. You can see that these chromosomes are being pulled away. Again, another slide here, right there. You can see chromosomes being pulled away. There's also going to be a little increase of the cell membrane pinching off. And then finally, telophase. Telophase followed by cytokinesis. So that's what we're looking at right here, right? We can see that there's 2 nuclei here, or what will be 2 nuclei as they start to close, and they're much smaller. You can see that they're smaller than the nuclei dispersed around them. And so we have the stages of mitosis. Let's take a look at telophase one more time, or telophase. And there it is, the 2 really, the DNA starting to come from that chromosomal level. The nucleus is starting to reemerge. The cell membrane of the nucleus is starting to reemerge, and the DNA becomes a little bit more dispersed within the nucleus. And so you can just see, it's like just a beautiful mosaic of cells growing up and outward from the tip of the root here. So you can see that a lot of the activity, I mean, this is a plant, but you can see a lot of the activity occurring towards the edges and the periphery as those cells continue to push upwards, and they become much more dispersed up through the top there. And there we have it. So 2 things I wanted to demonstrate here today. I wanted to just show you, I wanted to show you 2 slides here today. I wanted to look at the slides where we start to introduce what we're looking at under a microscope as we get into cytology and histology. What are we looking at under a microscope? What structures should we be looking at? Get familiar. It's going to take quite a bit of practice, right? Nothing comes perfectly on the first time. So I anticipate that it will take quite a bit of time to get familiar with what to look like, what to look at underneath the slide, what to get familiar with. And that's the goal here as we start to open up our stream of information through this YouTube live channel. I'll keep it brief. So we will preface a little bit into what I want to look at in the next couple of weeks here. But again, my goals are your goals. The goal is to pass my class with exceeding grades, as well as to prepare for a future in potentially a healthcare career. So look into the comments. If you have any questions for upcoming topics, please email me. Feel free to email me. Feel free to drop a line in the comments page, and we'll be able to address it that way. And again, like, subscribe, and you'll be able to continue with this format where we can share and interact with each other. But again, just a brief one, the inaugural Student Hours with Professor Sean Clavell. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time. I look forward to doing this again. We'll probably do it again next week, but look out for the announcement as we get ready for a great semester. It's a great day to be a Matador. And I'll play me out.